Real talk, y'all. I have spoken with so many people lately who had momentum on their book project when they got started, but have found that they have fallen off track. This is such a frustrating place to be, and unfortunately, I find that most new writers, when they find themselves in this slog place, will respond with exactly the wrong impulse. And that's why today I want to talk about the actual solution to getting your writing back on track. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar. This is the Page and Podium podcast. And today we're talking about how to rediscover the joy in your writing. Stay tuned. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the founder of Page and Podium Press. Every expert author's book is unique. And one of the things that we in the book industry are called to do is to draw out that uniqueness and meet every author where they are. And that's why I created the Expert Author Quiz. This freebie is going to give you a chance to go through the most common questions that I use to diagnose where folks are on their book journey. The quiz takes 3 to 5 minutes, and when you're done, you'll get a full readout of other authors just like you who have made it big in the industry, as well as the strengths you've got, the likely weaknesses along the way, and of course, some practical, personalized advice on how to best move forward. You can take the quiz now at pageandpodium.com/quiz. Today we're talking about how to actually finish your nonfiction book. And because I know that my recommendation here is maybe going to seem a little bit softer than you would have thought, I want to start with an actual client success story. Now, I worked with Dr. Lisa Karanin a couple of years ago on her book, and this book had such an interesting trajectory that I just want to share a little bit more about it. Now, Lisa studies the rhetoric of science, which is a fascinating area. She is an expert, quite literally, on the way that we as a culture talk about things like our health. Now, way back before 2020, she had started a book on pandemics and on the way that these viral spreads are not only something that is contagious in terms of actual virus, but also the way that the conversations about these viruses spread around our world. Well, what could be more relevant than that now, right? But unfortunately, because she had started that book before the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic hit us, she had really found herself knocked off track. Now, when she came to me, she was feeling totally lost. And it wasn't exactly what you might think. This was not an issue where she didn't know what she wanted to say. It was not an issue where she didn't think the book was important. Of course, she knew it was. The issue instead was that the book had sat on her hard drive for so long that she no longer had the confidence in her own ability to push forward on this book. And y'all, this is what I see 9 times out of 10 when people are stalled. Now, of course, most of the authors I work with do not have such a dramatic story as Lisa's, where, of course, they're working on a book that is suddenly so relevant. I get why that was a particularly unsettling situation. But even so, I do see this cycle of slog that really pulled Lisa in and made it really hard to escape from. And the way this happens is usually it's in a couple of stages. Now, oftentimes we will start out so excited about our new book project. Of course, this is our creative outlet. Oftentimes we've been thinking about it for a really long time, and we're kind of waiting for the right time. When that time hits, it can feel so satisfying, especially since most of us, when we start a new book, we've kind of pre-rehearsed what the beginning parts of that book will be. So when we sit down to write the first parts, oftentimes that is some of the fastest writing we will experience in the whole project. But what happens next is that as the book starts to progress through, oftentimes we will start to hit more and more difficult barriers. And at that point, something very natural and very human will start to happen, which is your brain will realize it needs more time to think about what you want to write before you can productively write. But that's your brain. That is your cognition. At the other end of the spectrum is your self-doubt, which I find will almost always trump that logical thinking and tell us instead that we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Now, especially if you are a high achiever and you have set some kind of very ambitious goal for finishing this book, that can very often be a recipe for disaster. Because while you're out there thinking, working through a lot of these ideas before you can productively write them, you are at the same time beating yourself up for not writing faster. Now you can see what happens here, right? When we feel unhappy with ourselves, when we feel disappointed about the work that we're doing, we will very often procrastinate from doing that work. It just does not feel good to sit down to do a task that we have been telling ourselves we're not good at. It's awful. And that's what Lisa described to me. She said that whenever she thought even about this project, let alone sat down to write, she was just flooded with self-doubt. She didn't know if she could do it. She was thinking about things like ADHD. She has ADHD, and whether that was stopping her from making progress. That is an identity level self-doubt, y'all. That is hard to get past. And through all of this inner struggle, the actual project itself got lost. She really lost the thread of why it was important to her to be working on this book. Now, I am happy to report that this book is finished and off to the publisher. It should be out sometime, if not this year, next. So this is a very, very happy ending story. But one of the things that we had to really, really lean on was thinking about how we could make this a joyful, engaging process. Now, fortunately, Lisa is a very curious person, and as we really started to unstick, work through some of those self-doubts, she was very, very easily able to find those seeds of curiosity that had led her to the project in the first place. And whether you are somebody who is a curious person and it's that kind of intellectual query that's driving you forward, or whether you're somebody that's working on, say, narrative nonfiction, a memoir, where you are really looking for kind of that emotional connection, there is nothing more powerful than finding that initial seed of joy, that thing that you thought you would enjoy when you started, and that probably when you started, you did enjoy. So that is why, even though I know it can be surprising, rather than giving you the advice to push yourself harder or butt in seat or write every day, I instead want to encourage you to do almost the exact opposite. I want you to lean back and I want you to find how this can be a joyful process. And remember, the reason I started with Lisa's story is this is exactly what she and I did together. There is no cheat code here. There is no kind of fast forward that we can take to move forward without finding a way to actually connect with that work. So today, I want to give you some concrete tips, some ways that you can move forward in this process of refinding that joy, that joyful connection you have with the project. Each of these are things that you can pull out and do any time you feel like you lose connection with the fun of the project. And I promise you, if you can keep that joy in your back pocket, your progress will be so much faster and the work will be so much better. Okay, so with that, let's get into these tips. Okay, my number one tip is so relevant in today's world. Everywhere we look, things feel heavy and hard, and there is violence and suppression everywhere we look. I hope that y'all are finding a way to find joy in your life amid this sea of disaster. But one of the things that is so true is that when we are living in a time that feels darker, like it does now, oftentimes when we try to write about heavier subjects, it just feels like one more thing to worry about. Now, I suspect that this was part of Lisa's struggle, but I can tell you for certain that this has been a struggle for me in the past. Now, if you're familiar with my personal books, the books that I write myself, I have written 2 books on the Black Lives Matter movement. And both of these books are available wherever you like to buy books. But the thing that I want to draw out here is that when my co-author, Andre E. Johnson, and I were working on our second book, the summer of 2020, one of the things that went on there was that we were really doing, like Lisa was, trying to get this book out in a timely way. We actually started writing it a little bit before the summer of 2020 really heated up, both with COVID and, of course, with George Floyd's terrible murder. But at that point, we were both faced with this very, very heavy world, having to look at this very, very heavy world as we spoke with folks who had been moved to action by this movement. But also, we really wanted to get this book out. And one of the things that I find has been so useful for my clients to think about is to not just focus on the heaviness of your topic, whether that is something like a social movement or your own emotional traumatic experience, but to instead focus on the bright side of it. I sometimes hear people describe this as keep telling the story. And oftentimes we want to end our story kind of in our head with the trauma we experienced. Well, one of the things that memoir urges us to do, and I would argue all nonfiction and fiction as well, is extend that story out to the point that we actually can see not only the bad thing, but the good thing that helps us make sense of this darkness. In other words, unless we have the good thing we're aiming for to contrast with this heavy trauma, we often can't see either of them very clearly. And that's why my first tip for finding the joy in your writing is to really look for the other side of the coin. What is the balance of what you're talking about? So for my co-author and I, one of the things that we really focused on was not only the violence and murder and police suppression that prompted the Black Lives Matter movement, but also at the joy and community and support and mutuality that we saw in the movement itself. And if we're continuing to tell the story, we also wanted to focus on what would a better world look like? What if we really focused not on bogging down what is happening now, although of course we do need to talk about that, but what if we held it in conversation with the better world we imagine? Now, I would argue that this will make your book better, but the other thing that it will do is help you connect with your joyful purpose. What is it you want this book to do? Because almost always, it's not rooted in the darkness of your topic. It's rooted in the promise of lightness. So as you are moving through your book project, one of the most valuable things that you can do is keep telling the story. Remember that every hard, heavy, dark thing you want to bring to light has a corollary, has an opposition that is the reason we are fighting against that dark thing. Focus on the change that you want to see, the change you want to create with your book, because this is almost always going to bring you a more joyful, more authentic engagement with your project, which again, not only makes it a better project, but it will help you move that project forward. Now, my second tip is really closely related to the first, and that is that rather than thinking in terms of your topic, I also want you to take some time to really focus on what you're trying to do with the book. Now, the folks that I work with have all different types of motivations for this. Sometimes it will be a desire to really help other people not have to struggle through what you're struggling through. It's particularly true when we're thinking of inspirational memoir or a whistleblower type of memoir. But also it is true when we're thinking of a prescriptive nonfiction book, a how-to book, that we are often trying not only just to help people feel less alone, but to literally give them advice, give them support, give them a pathway forward. Now, one of the powerful things about realizing that your book is not about you, it is about your reader, is that this allows us to write not from our closed down space where we are butt in seat, forcing ourselves to write, but rather to frame that writing experience as practice at connection. Now, one of the things that is universally true in psychology is that anytime we are feeling heavy or down or depressed, and particularly when we are feeling hopeless or helpless, is that a surefire way to help ourselves get out of that mindset is to help others. Now, sometimes this can feel a little bit counterintuitive because, of course, as we are looking for help for ourselves, we often draw ourselves further in, we isolate ourselves more. And that is why helping others is such a useful way to pull ourselves out of that funk, because helping others puts us in connection and community and conversation. Now, the trick here is that when we are thinking about writing our books, very, very often we are actually doing that by ourselves. There are a couple of tips here that you can suss out. One of them, of course, is to just make your writing more communal by joining a writing group, grabbing a friend, just sitting down for some co-working time. But the simpler trick here is that as you are writing, rather than thinking about pulling words from yourself to the page, I want you to think rather about joyfully expressing yourself to this person that you want to talk to. Now, of course, you have to want to talk to them, but I don't know a single nonfiction author that I have worked with who wasn't deeply invested in forming some type of communal connection with the person that was reading that book. Focus on them. This is almost always going to help us feel more joyful and invested and make the writing more fun. And when writing is fun, we want to do it. There is no faster procrastination buster. Okay, my third tip is that I want you to think a little bit outside the box. Sometimes all we need is a little bit of a different format to really move our writing forward. Now, I want to give you kind of a range of things because we can do a huge number of things with this type of play. The simplest and what I find is the most approachable way to change up your format with my clients is to do something in the form of journaling. Now, if you know me, you know I love to journal anyway. I journal every single day as kind of a way to just stay connected with myself, with my own perspective, my own thoughts, hidden needs and feelings. But when we are talking about being in a slog writing-wise, talking about a little bit different type of journaling. And all I mean here is that we are going to give ourselves permission on a journal page to just simply explain what we're trying to say. One of the things that is a surefire way to block your process in writing is to get so hung up on the way you're communicating. Anyone that has ever written anything, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what you want to say. It's not even that complicated of a thing. But when we sit down to actually put words to the idea, they somehow just do not seem to match up. Well, sometimes all it takes to jog things loose is to step away from your writing desk and your laptop and allow yourself to play in a different medium. So, the easiest, the simplest way forward here is just to grab a sheet of paper and a pen, preferably one you really like to write with. If it's a bright color, double points, and just simply write out what it is you want to say. Now, I am not going to suggest that you then take that and type it out. You can if you want to. But the point here is that we are freeing ourselves from productivity by allowing ourselves to do something that feels fun, feels different. It feels like, oh, an interesting kind of experiment. And there is nothing our brains love more than the novelty of that, than trying something new. But this does not have to only be limited to journaling. Any medium form is going to work for you. Are you somebody that is an excellent speaker? If so, maybe try making a video recording of yourself explaining it. Are you somebody that works really well in conversation with other people? You can really pick up on their body cues, their facial clues. You can really get some questions out of them, address those. have a conversation. Really just explain what it is you're trying to say. This, by the way, is a secret benefit of hiring a book coach because you always have someone for those conversations. Side note. And if you are somebody who is really, really good at just kind of chatting with yourself, kind of having a little dialogue in your head, go for a walk. Take your phone if you want to. You can record a little voice memo. But sometimes just getting out of the space and allowing yourself to transform those thoughts and ideas into a slightly different medium, whether that's written, spoken, visual, or just in your head, can be a really, really useful way to move yourself forward. That's really all we're looking for, right? It's just to unstick, to make this process feel a little bit freer. Because often when we are butt in seat, we can be so mean to ourselves. We can give ourselves so many limitations. And changing up the medium is going to shed all of those limitations, all of those unnecessary constraints, so we can just say the thing we're trying to say. Okay, my fourth tip is just simply to get around other writers. Now, I teased this a second ago when I mentioned this idea of joining a writing group or bringing somebody on to co-work with you. But this is an extra important tip for those of you who are neurodivergent. Now, I mentioned Lisa Karanen. She is ADHD, an ADHD person. She writes about ADHD at times too. But I have had many, many clients over the years who are ADHD. And one of the things that is just universally true with an ADHD brain is that having someone else with you is going to help with that executive dysfunction issue. So this is something that is going to connect back to this idea of joy, but it also is about working with particular brains. And when you have an ADHD brain, oftentimes having somebody, what's called body double with you, just simply sit with you while you do the task, is enough to just unstick things and start to move forward. So this is to say, you actually do not need a writing group per se. And particularly, I would actually say, in my experience, writing groups that critique each other's work can actually be more harmful than helpful. All you need is to be around other people who are interested in what you're doing. This does not have to be some lofty entrance into a difficult to enter membership group. You just simply need some other people. We've got to get the community, because once it starts to feel like something that you're getting together with friends to do, you're going to feel a lot more interested in doing it, right? You're going to be a lot more eager about getting to that writing time. That's really all we're looking for here, and it can make such a big difference. So look for a writing group if you are so inclined. Otherwise, you can also simply find somebody to body double with you. And the last thing that I will say, oftentimes I find that folks find it very, very helpful just to simply be in a space for conversation with other writers. So this is something that you can be doing on your own. You can think about how to do. If you would like to join Page and Podium for our group get-togethers for some of these conversations, you can always sign up to be part of that. Go to pageandpodium.com/blog, and you will see that you can sign up for our newsletter. You won't miss a single opportunity to get in conversation with others, to really find this joyful, fun space for writing. On to my next tip, tip number 5. I want you to get really curious about what it is you like about writing. See, one of the things that happens so often when we get into this stalled out slog of a writing place is we will forget what it was that got us to start the project in the first place. This, by the way, is so true for first-time authors, because you have never had the experience of getting to the end of that book and getting that rush of accomplishment. So you don't really have a measuring stick to move toward. But let me tell you what, when we can reconnect, rather than connecting with the product, but rather dial into what part it is about the process that we really love, that writing will feel effortless again. So, as you are moving through this point where you're trying to unstick yourself, I really want you to think about what it is you like about the writing process. Now, for some folks that I work with, this is just simply an intellectual curiosity. This is just simply kind of questioning, like, oh, I wonder what is new about this topic. I wonder what I can discover. I wonder how these ideas might fit together, or I wonder how I can break down this conventional link between these two concepts. For many, many people I work with, that actually is enough to get unstuck. Simply a couple of rousing conversations about the topic and how interesting it is can really reignite that fire. But there are a million choices here, all the way from, I think it's interesting to find the pieces and get them to fit together into a structure that communicates to my reader, all the way down to the minutia of, I want to choose the exact right word. Think of this beautiful poetic language and really make sure that that voice sings, and everything in between. So I want you to think about, what is the part of writing that you genuinely enjoy? We do not procrastinate and put off on things that we want to do, right? In fact, we push other stuff out of the way to do the thing we want to do. So if what we're trying to do is find a way to move our writing forward, the easiest way to do that is find a way to enjoy that writing. So this tip practically does benefit from some journaling. Oftentimes when we are in this slog, in this slump, we really have trouble even remembering what we liked about this process. So get out that journal. What is it that you like about writing? What is the fun part for you? Let's focus on that and let's start there, because that is going to be the surest way forward with your project. Okay, and my final tip, this is a little bit of a wacky tip even for me, but if you are having trouble getting unstuck, I want to give you permission to do something ridiculous. Now, what might this be? Well, earlier, where we were playing with our medium, I had you stay within kind of traditional writing type of bounds, right? We were journaling, we were explaining this type of thing. But when we get to this tip, oftentimes I find that folks have really struggled for a long time. And when we are trying to get unstuck here, we have really got to rattle those bones. And what I find is a totally different creative medium is often the way forward. Now, let me tell you what I mean here, because I have seen this in my own life. Now, a lot of you know that I have been working on a memoir. It is just almost finished. I'm heading into revision very, very soon. But as I have worked on that memoir, it has brought up a lot of emotionally really heavy stuff that my brain, I am sure, would prefer to leave in the vault. And as I shifted through all of that information, as I thought about how to write it, as I processed some of the things again, as all memoir writers do, there was a point that things felt so heavy to me that I just could not see sitting down to work on that project. Now, I cared about the project. I still loved the project and believed in it. I still knew that it was something I needed to do for my readers. And yet, I just could not find the joy in it. Well, y'all, you know what I did? First of all, I sat and I reflected. I meditated on what would feel good to me. And the thing I realized was I had been moving through this project, which has at its core the importance of creativity and joy and fun, but I had made it into a second job. I had taken away all of the fun of creating because I could see the marketability of this book. I could see what it could be as a product. And that meant that I had lost track of the joyful process. So what did I do? Well, I realized I needed to reintroduce that creativity, because as long as I was trying to produce, I was gonna keep getting the same results, which ironically was not producing at all. So what did I do? I went to Barnes & Noble, I bought myself a little kids watercolor paint set, and I started painting. And I did not paint scenes from my memoir, by the way. I like to just paint kind of random shapes. And wouldn't you know it, giving myself time to really play in creativity, to make something, create something that I was proud of, really helped me see that this could be joyful just like my book could be joyful. All of these things are joyful when they come from our joyful creative center. It is your birthright to enjoy this process. And that is true whether you are writing the most heartfelt, authentic memoir or a traditional business and leadership book. You deserve to enjoy that process, and it will be better if you enjoy it. So, as you're moving through the slog or the slump or whatever it may be for you, I hope that you are able to really embrace the fact that you deserve to enjoy this process, and that in fact, you can get so much more from it than just a book. If there's something I can do to help, I hope you'll reach out. pageandpodium.com has information on how to contact us, how to submit your manuscript for consideration, and how to work with us in our various programs that we offer to really help you get that book done. I can't wait to hear from you. Happy writing. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the founder of Page and Podium Press. Every expert author's book is unique. And one of the things that we in the book industry are called to do is to draw out that uniqueness and meet every author where they are. And that's why I created the Expert Author Quiz. This freebie is going to give you a chance to go through the most common questions that I use to diagnose where folks are on their book journey. The quiz takes 3 to 5 minutes, and when you're done, you'll get a full readout of other authors just like you who have made it big in the industry, as well as the strengths you've got, the likely weaknesses along the way, and of course, some practical, personalized advice on how to best move forward. You can take the quiz now at pageandpodium.com/quiz.